Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I bring a new pair of words to share their stories with each other and you. You can find our past episodes and the occasional blog post on our website at lexitecture.com. Follow along with us on Twitter and Facebook at Lexitecture, and if you really like what we do, you can support the show at patreon.com/lexitecture. Today's episode, Christmas Winter. Shall we word?
Shall we word? That is a good idea. Shall we word? On a bright cloud of music shall we fly? That's not that song.
Well, I enjoyed it anyway.
You're always very nice when I randomly burst into song. Not everyone feels like that. Okay, do you want to go first or shall I?
I'll go first because I went really route one with this one, as they say, which I believe is like I think that's a thing I've more or less only heard on like British TV and British people say route one. I don't know why, but anyway, this is.
I have literally never heard that used.
Oh, nice.
By
Okay.
a British person. Like we don't.
Maybe it's just on TV or podcast.
We don't call roads that.
Well, like, yeah, no, I don't think I've ever heard it referred to that, just as in the easiest method. You know what? Maybe it's just the Taskmaster podcast. They use it all the time.
Oh, it could just
maybe
be them.
That's what it is. Maybe
I like when you said, as they say, I've gone about route one. I thought, oh, this must be a North American thing because they call roads routes sometimes. Sometimes, yeah. On that continent, maybe. Huh. And yeah, I was genuinely like, oh, didn't know that. Interested.
Look at that.
And then you told me it was British and I was supposed to know it, but I do not.
Yeah. Anyway, my word is Christmas. So
interesting.
I kept it basic and seasonal and timely, etc., etc.
Who's got the energy for more than that at this time of year? Yeah,
very few. Certainly
basic,
not I.
Seasonal, timely. If you're managing at least 2 out of those 3, I think you're doing all right.
Doing okay. So just in the interest of completionism, I'm going to get Christmas N2 from the OED out of the way because I was confused. Because I looked up Christmas and it had Christmas N1, the standard one. We'll get to it. And then Christmas N2, which was a type of hemophilia. And I went, I'm sorry, what? Ooh. So I clicked on that one. And apparently there's a type of hemophilia called Christmas disease. I don't know enough about hemophilia or medicine or the body or science or fill in a whole bunch of other Mad Lib style words here to know exactly what it is that differentiates Christmas disease hemophilia from bog standard hemophilia, but it's a particular type. It shows up in 1952 and is named after Stephen Christmas, who apparently was a British-born Canadian photographer who also had Christmas disease, and he was the first patient for it to be like fully explored, and so they named it Christmas disease.
Oh, that's sort of a sucky reason to be an eponym, isn't it?
Sort of is. Yeah. It's like how Lou Gehrig having Lou Gehrig's disease. What are the chances? Yeah. So Christmas disease.
He does sound like an awesome guy, and a lot of things about him I like already, just from that very brief description.
Yeah. That said, I'm going to go out on a limb, and this is like a real hot take, I think, but I think I'm right in saying that the more common sense of Christmas is to refer to the midwinter festival of Christian origins as opposed to the Christmas disease.
I think I'm no expert, Ryan, but I'm going to back you up on that one.
Okay, good. Whew. So yeah, Christmas time, Christian festival around the solstice-ish-esque time period, celebrating the birth of Jesus, and the general secular season surrounding it on either end is what I'm talking about now.
Cool.
Also, to Christmas, the other thing in the OED's list when you search Christmas is a verb. And I never pass up a chance to point out how verbing nouns is
verbing of the noun
is really not new. And this is another one of those. To Christmas, it was a verb in 1594. and it was to celebrate Christmas or to spend Christmas in a certain time. So like I plan on Christmasing at my parents' place this year, that type of thing.
See, part of my devilish little soul wants to use that on a social media type arrangement and see how long it takes somebody to say, "Oh, don't be stupid, you can't use Christmas as a verb," and go, 1564, bitches.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it's also a verb. However, back to Christmas. The noun, the first noun, not the disease noun. It is a relatively simple compound of Christ and Mass, although there are certain forms and instances where it seems like it might be a shortening of Christmas,
Okay.
which was an early sort of variant kicking around in like sort of 1400s.
I wonder if it just didn't fit on the cards.
But it may not. It may just not fit on the cards.
Yeah.
So the first part of Christmas, I think still obviously, but maybe not. But either way, it comes from Latin and ultimately the Greek Christos. Was originally like a title given to Jesus, but then it sort of, I think, became kind of like people just sort of thought it was like a surname.
Mr. Christ.
Yeah. And so, or synonymous with.
What does it actually mean?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Because the
I'm
Greek.
glad I'm here. It's not very often
So
that
good.
happens, but occasionally.
The Greek Christos was a verbal adjective meaning anointed or the anointed one.
Okay.
And so that's where this came from. And this is also like another sort of bugbear of mine is people who get all hat ringing about Xmas and like I don't know if you've
does that shit all the time.
Oh, all the time. So I don't know if you've ever had the misfortune of being around a lot of people who complain about people writing it as Xmas instead of Christmas, and as though this is some weird like taking the Christ out of Christmas
Emoji
nonsense
type text speak.
Yeah. So it's very silly. It's always bugged me. It's bugged me for a long, long time, both as a word nerd and a Christian, when people are like, this is taking Christ out of Christmas. It's like, meanwhile, they're beating people up over spending money on toys for their children. But like, no, it's the X is the problem. Thanks, folks.
Aren't the holidays fun?
They're so good. But yeah, so obviously X is a shortening of Christ. It is the first, X isn't the first letter of the Greek word for Christ because X is an English letter, but X is identical in form to
Chi.
Yes, to the first Greek letter of the word Christ. So it is for a very, very long, like 1200s in English alone, has been used to replace X, particularly in Christmas even. There's like a writing from around about the year 1100 where it's sort of the first instance of the early usage of Xmas instead of Christmas. So it's been around for forever. It means the same thing. It's silly to worry about it, so don't.
'Tis the season to annoy pedants. Fa la 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 la.
Love it so much. Next up is Mass. And so
I genuinely, when you said it's made up of Christ and Mass, I was like, it has never occurred to me to question the Mass part of Christmas.
Yeah.
Why ever not?
Right? So, and the same thing, this one's interesting because I didn't know where it came from until looking this up. It's like that I don't get it. And yes, it is the same word now it sort of, I think, more or less exclusively refers to Catholic services. Like you wouldn't hear a lot of, or at least in my experience, you don't hear a lot of services in other traditions, mainline denominations or otherwise, referring to their services as Mass.
Here is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
In Scotland, certainly, I can speak with some limited authority here. I was raised Catholic. We went to Mass. And as far as I'm concerned, within Scotland, if you talk about Mass, you're Catholic. You're right enough. So that's... I'm also having a massive, well, duh, of course moment when I'm thinking, I've never thought about the Mass part. Well, yeah, it's the same as the mass part. But interestingly, when I started working as an organist in the Scottish Episcopal Church, the Scottish Episcopal Church is not in any way affiliated with the Catholic Church, like very, very much not a Catholic thing.
Yeah.
However, their liturgy, their traditions, and particularly what they call high Episcopalian churches,
Yes.
which in itself is a fairly delightful term to use. It always makes me laugh when I think of priests on stilts. But high Episcopalians use so much Catholic language that I certainly associate with the Catholic Church, that I thought,
Yeah.
I was under the impression that we were the only people who used those. I say we, I'm not a Catholic anymore. But, the old habits die hard. Pun sort of intended, it wasn't great. So it was really interesting to me to find that, like, the hymns that would be sung in the Episcopal Church were like the sort of hymns that used to be part of the Catholic liturgy, but had kind of fallen out of fashion and been replaced by things considered to be a bit more modern. So it was a bit eye-opening for me to hear Episcopal people talk about Mass, because I associated that with Catholicism, but I quickly learned that, in fact, the Episces were pretty much more Catholic than the Catholics were.
Right. Yeah,
Anyway.
I think that's probably true. Like, I don't have a lot of experience in the high church Anglican circles, but I would imagine it's fairly similar, because they have a lot of the bells and whistles literally are the same.
The nickname that I can't remember who said, somebody within the Episcopal Church certainly, they refer to it as bells and smells.
Yes, bells and smells is also high church Anglican. Yeah, exactly. It's also a really good pun fodder, because you could just, if you ever do go to a high church service and someone asks how it was, you could just talk about how thurible it was. There it is.
Oh, Ryan, in that brief pause, I thought, is Ryan going to wait to say something like really edgy and controversial? No, he's just going to make a truly terrible dad joke about about
an incredibly esoteric and specific niche bit of church kit.
Ryan, your theology degree is showing.
I know. Oh, good stuff. Yeah.
Very good.
Sorry, not sorry. So any whoozle be. So it's the same word as the Catholic Mass, and the reason that other traditions sometimes do use it is that it is sort of specific to services where the sacrament of the Eucharist or communion happens. So that's the bread and wine for people to whom those terms are unfamiliar. And
do you know how terrifying it is to take someone who has no background in church going whatsoever to a Catholic Mass?
Oh, I mean, I've never done that particular, but I've done it with Anglican services, and
because
so I have.
My husband was not. The closest my husband got to any sort of faith was he went to BB, Boys Brigade, and Boys Brigade is in some way affiliated with maybe Church of Scotland. I'm not terribly sure, and so they would like go to church at Christmas to sort of hold up banners and sing carols, and that was literally it.
Yeah.
And then of course he joined my family, which is like, it's an enormous Catholic mafia. I can't describe it in any better terms. Yeah, it's how it is. And it was probably like a wedding on a funeral. And at the end, he was like, "Oh my God, what is?" And it was so funny because I genuinely was like, "Oh yeah, this is pretty weird. I don't do it anymore, but like my family does it, and it's important to my granny and stuff. So we go." Oh yeah. Oh, you're absolutely freaked out right now, aren't you?
Yeah.
The standing up and the sitting down, and then there's a kneeling bit, and then there's a bell. And why did I have to shake hands with people? What's going on? So I imparted to him the golden rule of being in a church that you're unfamiliar with. and that is to pick an old lady and watch her.
Pick an old lady ahead of
does.
you, somewhere seated further towards the front. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. That's how you do it. So, pro tip for anyone out there.
Pro tip, indeed.
Sorry,
pray continue.
It's called a mass, and it comes from the Latin missa, was the sort of the closing prayer at the end of a Eucharistic service. And I find this satisfying in a couple of different ways. The first is slightly more irreverent. I mean, I say slightly. Just drop the slightly. The first is more irreverent because it seems to suggest to me that for a long, long time now, many people's favorite part of a church service was the end. And so they've named it after the very last thing they have to do.
Sir, you are not wrong.
So, and I don't even feel, I know that people are, again, I can hear people being like harumphing or whatever. It's not even, it's just, if yourself, like C.S. Lewis wrote all the time about how his favorite part of the service was getting to leave. And it's,
As a kid who was taken to church on Christmas morning, like, approximately the last thing in the universe you want to do is have to be taken away from your new toys to stand up and sit down and sing and pray. And you know, like, at that point, you're like, when is it the end? Is it the end now? When's the end? Mom, is it the end? Dad, end? Anytime soon? End? It's the end, yay! And then you go back home and eat delicious things and play with said toys.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. And even if, but I think even for people for whom services can indeed genuinely be, important and nourishing and enjoyable places, there does come a point when it's like, these seats aren't very comfortable.
The seats are never comfortable, dude.
No,
I don't know what the situation's like in Canada, but it's so rare to go into a church and find that it's well heated.
Oh yeah, that too. Well, they're cavernous buildings, and they're
often, the architecture is not like. It does make me wonder if it's like maybe you'll know more about this than me. If it's like, was church supposed to be cold? Like, did somebody decide back in the terrible days of like burning witches and such, like, were they like, you can pray, you can come in here and you can pray and you can look at God, don't touch, but also you have to be freezing and miserable while you do that because God, something.
That sounds about right for a certain era of Christendom.
It's not out with the realms of possibility, is it?
No. The second reason,
dudes.
Yeah, it's the second reason is that I like this, and this is sort of, again, theology degree raising its head, is that I just can't help but think that the world would be a significantly better place if more people who did go to church and sort of incorporated that into their lives thought about the real work of Christianity starting when they're sent out from the church at the end of the service, instead of being like well, that's that for that. See you in 7 days. I just think that'd be better.
So I have a friend who, she has some interesting stories. She was raised in, well, if you asked her about it, she would say, after I escaped the cult.
Right.
And so sort of, I'm aware that people from all over the place listen to this podcast, which I'm very grateful for. And as much as I am a hugely irreverent person who is, sometimes I'm actually quite anti-religious, and I try not, like, I recognise that my opinion and your opinion may be very different when it comes to this area. And yet at the same time, we are friends and we are able to discuss these things. And, we, just because we don't believe in the same things doesn't mean that we can't be friends and have that connection. Mm-hmm. But I know that people get upset sometimes when you talk about religion in certain ways, when you refer or import certain meanings to things that are perhaps not things that you believe in, but that are really important to other people. And what I'm getting at here is I don't want people to feel offended. And if I presume you feel the same, I don't know, but if ever I say something on this podcast and you think, well, that woman is a dickhead and she doesn't know what she's talking about, please get in touch and say that woman is a dickhead and she doesn't know what she's talking about. And, you know, I am more than happy to learn about not being a dickhead, quite frankly. You know, I feel like that's a reasonable thing to want to learn about. However, my friend had a fairly horrific, awful, terrible time as a child as a result of the religious beliefs of her parents.
Right.
Let's just leave it at that.
Yep.
And she has, as she puts it, escaped the cult, but she has a lot of family members, particularly extended family, who are still very much part of that community that she was so harmed by. Mm-hmm. And that's difficult for her. Obviously, it causes conflict.
Yeah, of course.
However, we are both quite black-hearted humans, and occasionally she will vent about this to me. And so we had a conversation a little while ago where she said, I just have to say to somebody today, Christians are the worst. They are so awful and I hate them. And I was like, well, you know, I'd love to argue with you, but also, and what I like for her, particularly with this particular branch of her family, Christianity is about judgment. It's about trying to impose your beliefs on other people.
Yep.
It's about stifling people, power, all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, the thing that sort of, whenever I encounter terrible people of any religion who try to thrust those religious terriblenesses down your throat, my response is always the same. And this is what I said to her in response to her message. I was like, well, the thing to remember is they are wrong. You know, like I may not be a person who has a faith at the heart of my life, but I've read the Bible. I was raised within a faith. And I'm pretty sure all the parts about being really, really terrible to people aren't there. Or if they are there, they're there with a very, very, very strict rejoinder saying, don't do these things, don't be terrible.
Yeah.
Like, love thy neighbour as thyself pretty much covers it.
Yeah. Don't do what Donnie Don't does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, religion, ranting, sorry.
So, just to wrap it up then, so Mass comes from Missa, which is that closing prayer at the end of a Eucharist service. But it's, etymology-wise, it is the same root as in the word dismissal. And also the same word as mission, because you are being sent out and let go. It's
missive, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's past participle of Latin mittere, which means to let go and to send. And yeah, so missive is another one. It's something that's been sent out. And also missile.
Oh, of course.
Is the same sort of root. So so being sent out from the service, so the Mass and Christ and Christmas.
Cool. I like that a lot. I like how it means both let go and sent out.
Yeah.
Given the context that we're talking about, because as you say, I do like that C.S. Lewis. I didn't know that he wrote about how the best part of Mass was the end.
Yeah, it's not a direct quote, but he wasn't a big fan of. I mean, he was kind of a crusty gentleman in general in a lot of ways, but one of the many things. I'm under no disillusions. If I had a time machine and I went back to meet C.S. Lewis, he would be.
Listen, I was just
horrified by me in general.
I was just about to say I would really like to drink a pint of beer with C.S. Lewis, although I suspect from what you're telling me and from what I know about him, he would not be cool with that.
Yeah, the feeling would not be mutual, but I would very much like to. Yeah, like going to a personal pilgrimage of mine would be to go to the pub where the Inklings met and hung out and everything else, because that was kind of more up his street as far as he would much rather just be talking about theological things and wrestling with concepts about God, but in a pub with a steak in front of him and a beer in his hand, which I can get behind that. And
writing awesome books about, lions and fawns and such like.
Yeah. That too. So,
Cool. I'm I have a lot to think about within that. You know, the X of Xmas hadn't really occurred to me. I'm still thinking about that. But I'm glad it's the season to annoy pedants.
Yeah.
And I say that as a recovering pedant myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I was saying to you about, I noticed a massive typo in an important thing. Like, if I had sent that document away and then noticed the massive typo, I genuinely wouldn't have been able to sleep.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it would have haunted me for many, many, many years. So I'm glad I caught that.
Yeah. I'm also
But
glad you
also,
caught that.
I feel like if somebody sent me an important document and it had a spelling mistake in it or a typo, or basically I'd written the same two words twice, important as. And
Oh, okay.
I would look at it and go, oh, they haven't picked that up. I wouldn't be like, condemn them to death.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I suppose that's a slight improvement on my pedantry.
Yeah.
I have very, very mixed feelings about the holiday this Christmas. I'll not go into all of those, but I used to really love it when I was a child, and now that I'm an adult, I'm not really sure that I do. And there's lots of reasons for that. And I feel like it's always important to mark the fact that it can be a really crappy time of year for lots of people.
Yes.
And it can be a really, really
100%.
joyous, great time of year for many, many people. But here is another thing I think is relevant when I think about Christians and whether or not they're actually, like you say, just ticking it off on a chart to say I've done my Christianing this week.
Yeah.
Or they're actually being sent out to, live that faith. If other people try to tell you what your Christmas should look like, if Christians or anyone else, if people try and make you feel bad about not enjoying Christmas, just don't take any of that into your life. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to presume that this is still a thing that happens because I'm not on Twitter anymore. But the wonderful Sarah Millican has the best way of spending Christmas.
Okay.
And I'm going to look this up while I'm talking to you, just so that I don't give out any incorrect information. But basically, in recognition of the fact that Christmas can be really difficult for people, she takes part in a little Twitter enterprise where she basically says, #join in. And if you use that hashtag on Christmas Day, Sarah Millican, or one of the, by now, many thousands of people who do join in, they will message you and they'll say, hope you're okay, or they'll just send you a nice little message. And it's just the loveliest thing, because social media can be kind of crappy. And
Yeah.
it's also such a powerful force for goodness if it's done well. And it's literally just a lovely woman saying, I know that people struggle at this time of year. I want them to know that I'm thinking about them, and so are lots of other people. So here's a really simple, accessible thing that you can do just to remind you that you're not on your own. So
That's fantastic.
good old Sarah Millican. Lots of reasons to love her.
Yeah, absolutely. So many. She's pretty awesome.
Okay. Well, I don't think we probably have done something slightly adjacent in the past, but given our lack of pre-episode kind of organisation, it's not even that, we don't want to know beforehand what each other's word is going to be, but I don't know if we've both had seasonal words in one go before, because my word this time around is winter.
Oh, nice.
And just like you, I was really interested to see that when I looked up in the OED, which is almost always the place that I start, that there are 3 noun definitions for the word winter and 1 verb. So in order of date, we have, and in order of date, we're going back a long, long time. This is an early Old English word. We have the obvious, generally used, I would say most commonly used meaning of the word, the season between autumn and spring.
Right.
However, we also have, I like this a lot, there is from around about 1384, the verb to winter, in other words, to pass or to spend the winter or to stay in a particular place during the winter, it's used at that time and in that point to talk about animals, animals wintering with or whatever else is going on. Then next, chronologically, in 1668, we've got winter, a metal rack hung from the bars of a fire grate or kitchen range on which a pot, kettle, flat iron, etc. is placed to be heated or kept warm. I didn't know that word meant that thing. And then in 1683, in some forms of hand-operated printing press, a block of wood supporting the carriage and having a tenon at each end to fit into corresponding mortices in the cheeks. I don't really know what mortices in the cheeks means, but I do like saying those words.
Yeah.
Mortices in the cheeks.
Mortices in the cheeks. I like it. Again,
So,
no idea what it means, but I like it.
I was very curious about the fact that there were so many winters going on. And yeah, I say this a lot, but my God, there are a lot of compound words featuring winter. I won't go through all of them. There's literally an entire massive column. There's winter vomiting bug. Not such a good one.
Oh.
There's winter woolies, much more pleasant.
Yeah.
Winter sweet, winter green, winter's night, winter purslane, which is again a lovely word. I don't know what it means. We've got winter marjoram, winter killing, winter jasmine, winter hellebore, winter daffodil, so lots of flowers, winter beaver, and capital letters, Father Winter, I presume the personification of the season, rather like Old Father Time. And two curious things happened when I started looking at this word. I found out, first of all, that, as I said, it's cited first in the OED and in Old English. And that citation, winter byth kjøldost, lengten hrimgost, summer sunwletegost. Since the theme of this word thus far is sounds I like to make but don't know what they mean. I believe that this is from Maxims 2, presumably the popular sequel.
Yeah.
And I believe it's saying winter is the coldest, rather like April is the cruelest month. And then summer is the sunlightiest. That's I'm kind of guessing a little, but Old English is delightfully unfamiliar and familiar at the same time. It's one of the things I like best about it.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting. There aren't all that many words out there where the fifth citation by date is the Owl and the Nightingale. The seventh is the Wycliffite Bible.
Jeez.
And the eighth is Piers Plowman. This is a word with a long storied history.
Yeah.
So the OED defines it as the season between autumn and spring, generally regarded as lasting from December to February in the Northern Hemisphere and from June to August in the Southern Hemisphere, characterised by cold weather, long nights, the absence of leaves on deciduous trees, and the hibernation of certain animals. Also, the colder half of the year, including the cooler parts of spring and autumn, as contrasted with summer.
Right.
Winter. How's your winter going?
Shockingly mild, actually, so far. It's crazy. I was saying to our Ukrainian friends who just got their own apartment that Canada's being extremely welcoming to them because we just had our very first proper snowfall the other day.
Oh, wow.
And we only got it was supposed to be this massive snowpocalypse where they were, batten down the hatches, we'll have 25 centimeters by Saturday. And this was Thursday afternoon they were saying this. And I mean, we got I think by the time it stopped snowing on Saturday afternoon, we probably had 10 centimeters, maybe 10 or 15. So not a whole lot. And it's never been very cold yet. It's the lowest it's gone is -10. It just hasn't had winter yet.
So, we've talked about this many, many times before about how hugely subjective winter is. Because 10 centimetres of snow would drive this country to a scudding halt. Like, lives
Right.
would be ruined, people would die, alarm, chaos, all those things. That would be a lot of snow.
Right.
Also, in the UK, we have just had, in fact, it's a little bit wild. I don't wish to be any more British than I can be about talking about the weather, but
Okay.
we've just come through an unusually cold period for this time of year. It's been a while since we've had such a cold December, where the temperatures have gotten down to -3 and 4. Yeah, so we're all like losing our minds.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm aware that in your half of the Northern Hemisphere, this is laughable.
Yeah.
But saying that, so at the moment, I don't know, there's still a lot of ice outside. We got a little bit of snow, not loads, but there's a lot of ice outside. However, tomorrow, the forecast is that it's going to be 13 degrees.
Wow.
That's just not supposed to, like, there must have been an administrative error at Weather HQ.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I can think of.
Was the decimal wrong or something? Like
Yeah,
what?
someone's like not carried the 4, or I don't know. I don't know what's happening.
Jeez.
So yeah, I do enjoy the fact that your winter is, like, what's the coldest it gets around your parts? What's a cold winter?
The cold. Well, when January rolls around, it's going to start getting properly cold. I have no doubt, and that's like, I mean, it's basically every year it gets. We usually hit -40 at least once.
What?
Yeah, not for very long.
So
Last year, I think last year we probably had about 4 or 5 days of like properly like deadly cold, like -35, -40.
that's wild. So it has to be colder than -40 for a Canadian to say, "Whoa, it's cold this year, eh?"
Well, we like to that's what we say to everyone else. And we're happy, we sort of happily let everyone else, but just like, I mean, I think people from everywhere, people in hot climates still go outside and go, man, it's hot out. And it's like, you've lived here for 40 years. You live in a jungle. It's never not hot. And yet they will walk outside and go, man, it's a hot one today. And so, and of course, with all the, yes, there's variations and we're not a monolithic, blah, 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 blah. But generally speaking, people don't actually kind of go, man, it's really cold. Like, you start getting, how about this? I'll put it this way. You definitely start getting fewer and fewer and fewer people scoffing at the idea of someone saying, man, it's cold out, as you get below -20, 25.
Yeah. Okay.
Then you usually pretty much get a consensus around, like, when it gets down to -30, you've got a consensus that it's cold.
Everyone's cold at that point.
Yes.
Cool. So etymologically, winter has come into English from so many exciting places. We've got Old English winter, UI, Old English wintran, both with an I and a Y. We've got winter, WINTR, as an inflection, and WYNTR, so without the E.
Right.
We get variations like vinter, winter, and all these exciting, usually Y-laden spelling variations that you tend to see as a word progresses through the kind of historical forms of English.
Right.
It's cognate with Old Frisian winter, so it's hugely Germanic. Old Dutch, they also have winter, WINTER. Old Saxon, winter with an A, and the same in Old High German. Early Scandinavian, so like runic Swedish language, we've got vintur, and Old Icelandic vetur. So Sweden, Iceland, Danish, the Goths, the Germans, the Dutch, all using a very similar sounding word. Now,
yeah, I wonder if it was Old Frisian first, because everyone just kept running around going, man, it's Frisian out here.
Oh, sir, you really are on dad joke form today.
Yeah. Sorry, not sorry. Go on.
No, you're not, don't be sorry. It's who you are.
Yeah, it's true.
So, here's what it says. There's a little note in the etymology section of the OED. The word is not attested in other branches of Indo-European. in which a different base is used to denote the season.
Hmm.
And it directs me to a word that I've never ever seen before, but here it is with its own definition in the OED, although
Okay.
it is it's given as an obsolete word. And the word is Himes, Hiems.
Oh.
And it means winter, especially in a poetic personification. Now, this is cited from around about 1450. Yemps
Okay.
endeth the end of February, so it's given Yemps, Y-E, but it's the same word. Now, Himes heaps the dike with snow and shews her frosty face. And where frosty Himes with an icy mace strikes dead all living things. And I'd never ever heard this word before, never ever seen it before, and I was quite curious about Himes.
Yeah.
So I did a bit more digging, and I discovered that Himes is believed to be from a Proto-Italic Hiom, from Proto-Indo-European Giom or Gaim, so Gheim.
Okay.
You know how pirates are written in various different ways.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting about this is it's cognate with the ancient Greek word Kion, meaning snow, and
Okay.
Kaima, meaning snow. It's also cognate with the Persian Zemistan, Albanian Dimer, Welsh Geith, Sanskrit Hima, Hittite Giman, Armenian Himer, and Proto-Slavic Zima. Now, those are all really sexy Proto-Indo-European arms and offshoots
Yeah.
that you don't always hear from when you look at etymologies.
No, it's true.
The most common linguistic route for words to come into English, Proto-Indo-European, maybe Greek, maybe Latin first, usually takes in one or both of those languages. You might find other interesting cognates, but
Yeah.
Greece, Persia, Albania, Wales, Sanskrit is a language native to India, where, don't get me wrong, they get winter, but it's not a place that you think of as hugely wintry.
Yeah, no.
And so I started to wonder why it is that one half of the Proto-Indo-European kind of area went for winter. They went Germanic, and the other half, they went for Himes. And I sort of idly mused as to whether it might be to do with different weather types and how
Oh, okay.
winter isn't the same everywhere you go.
Right, yeah.
But I have this is the folkiest of folk etymology.
Right.
I am idly musing. I don't have any particular proof. Now, when I looked it up on Etym Online, interesting again, because it makes the point that there's the Germanic root, and also puts forward the theory that it may be from the PIE root wend, which is a nasalized form of the root wed, and what wed means is water.
Oh.
In other words, the wet
The
time
wet
of
season.
the year. So wed has cognates including water, vodka, whiskey, hydra, carbohydrate, inundate, otter, and all the kind of hydrangea, hydrant, hydrophobia, all those sorts of words.
Yeah, yeah.
So one theory is that it is a word that describes the the wet time of year.
Yeah.
There is another theory that suggests that perhaps it is about the white time of year.
Right.
Now, things get a little bit complicated at this point because, well, really, who knows?
Yeah.
There is an early Irish word, find, F-I-N-D. Again, apologies if we've got any Irish speakers. I do not know how to pronounce Irish. But it does, the OED points this out and links to a lovely, lovely word that I'd never seen or heard before. The word is findrinny, F-I-N-D-R-I-N-N-Y. And Findrinny, there is an Irish spelling also. It's a kind of white metal alloy, maybe white bronze or electrum. And it's used quite often in a poetic way, or when talking about the ancient world. So in Norse shields the rim was of iron, but in the description of shields to be found in Irish poems and prose tales, the material of the rim is almost always Findrinny. So the finned part of Findrinny refers to the whiteness, and that part, kind of makes sense. But at that point, the etymological trail kind of runs cold. The OED suggests that maybe it's to do with winter, the time of year when it's windy.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It says, although semantically plausible, neither of these explanations can be accepted with confidence.
Right.
Interestingly, Etym also points out that Proto-Indo-European has a root that means winter. And that root is the one that gives us Heims, so Gheim. And it has all of the cognates that have that hyber part in them. So hibernation,
Oh, of course.
for example,
That's
or
so
hibernal.
cool.
And that hadn't occurred to me at all. Having a little look at the University of Texas at Austin Linguistics Research Center Indo-European Lexicon of Pi, Etymon and IE reflexes, they have much the same sort of thing going on. There is, however, there's a couple of interesting things here. First of all, this word is, this root has given us the cognate chimera, which they define here in this as a she-monster with a lion's head, a goat's body, and a serpent's tail from Greek mythology. I don't know what that has to do with winter. Can't figure out a snowy connection. The Pi root means snow or winter, but I'm a bit curious about that one. I might have a little further research bubble to pop with that particular one. And the other one that I found particularly pleasing, the Pi root gaim gives us the word gamling, Gamling, which is defined here as a group leader in Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings.
Cool.
So we have whiteness, wetness, chimeras, and Tolkien.
Weird.
That's a pretty good mix.
Yeah. That is a good
We've
blend.
got an interesting white, shiny metal, all of which are good things to read about when it's cold outside and dark and you haven't seen the sun in what feels like months. But of course, it will come to an end. Spring is, well, maybe it's already springing. I don't know.
It's I always find it interesting when there's a Proto-Indo-European root for a word, but it's not the one that gives us the English of that word.
Yeah, sure.
Like, it's really just kind of, to me, shows how fluid all of this is. You know, like, there was but then on the other hand, sometimes there's a word that it's like, yep, this goes back to the Proto-Indo-European days. It's always meant the exact same thing.
Yeah.
No fuss, no muss. It's ancient. That's all. Somebody made this noise thousands of years ago, and that's the noise that we agreed on and have always agreed on. Go. So it can go either way, and that's always just really neat to me. I like the wind thing. Does speak to me a little bit, because you never hate a wind like you hate a wind in the winter. Like, it's
dude, I live in Scotland. We have a lot of wind here.
Oh, and listen, I'll stand by this. I know what I said. If you came here, you take the windiest day that you've ever experienced in Scotland, you come here in late January, early February, and we will go out on a windy day when it's also -30.
No. No, that's not a thing I'm ever going to agree to do. If it's minus 30 outside, then going outside had better be something that I have to directly do that day to stay alive. That's the only reason I'm going outside on that
That's
night.
it. And it's but wind on a day like that, it like you fully appreciate King Lear's just running around on the heath screaming at the weather. Like, because you'll swear at the wind, and it's personal.
I mean, I've never been anywhere that's close to temperatures like that. I genuinely have no experience on which to draw. It doesn't get below -5 in Scotland, certainly in this part of Scotland, all that often. -10 would be like, whoa, holy shit, emergency. We're not equipped for temperatures like that. So when people do talk casually about -30, it's like you might as well be describing Mars.
Right. Yeah.
And you can extrapolate from your experience of it can be cold and then it gets cold and windy and suddenly it's double cold.
Yeah.
But when it's already colder than I can even imagine, to then add wind, it's too much. I genuinely am just making brain marshmallows as we speak.
Yeah, like on our weather reports actually do factor in wind and give us a second temperature.
Yeah, you get your wind chill.
Yeah.
What's the differential usually? Like what can it be?
It can be upwards of like an extra 10 degrees.
Holy shit.
Like it's 30 below, but with the wind chill it's 40. And again, it gets bigger the lower the temperature gets. Because a wind at -5 is not going to make it feel like -30 or even -15. Yeah. But when you're already at -30 and you add what would normally be a pleasant breeze, you will react to that in exactly the same way as you would if some stranger randomly walked up and slapped you in the face.
Yeah, you're not really selling Canada to me, if I'm being honest, dude.
I feel like people should show up here with their eyes wide open. Except in the winter. Close your eyes, because that also hurts.
Yeah, your eyelashes freeze, yeah?
Yep. Yeah.
Do you know what I'm just thinking? Yeah. It did get pretty cold in Korea. It didn't get -30 cold, but it got pretty cold. So I have experienced sub-Scotland temperatures. The reason I was reminded
of that, because it would sometimes hit -10, -15, sometimes.
One notable occasion I walked to work with, like as is my habit, because I have naturally curly hair, it's almost always a bit wet when I leave the house, and by the time I got to work, my hair had frozen.
Yeah. Did you notice though that even
this is not a thing? Is this a thing? My hair is frozen.
Why is this happening?
And that's it for another episode of Lexitecture. To get in touch with us about something you heard in this episode, you can email us at words@lexitecture.com. You can also follow along and talk to us at Lexitecture on Facebook and Twitter, and at Lexitecture Podcast on Instagram. For back episodes and the occasional blog post, visit us at Lexitecture.com. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.